Hi, I just had a word or two about the exegesis assignment that you've got for the end of the semester. Some of you had me in class for Old Testament 1, and so you've already had an exegesis paper returned to you. Better pay attention to the marks that I made on that paper if you've got them. If you have taken Old Testament 1 with another instructor, you've probably had to write an exegesis paper, but some of you may not have had much experience in that. I recognize that the students in the seminary come from different backgrounds. I did not have a degree in Bible studies or religion when I first attended seminary, and many of you will have come from different backgrounds with different expectations as far as what you wrote or how you reported. And the people in this class are getting different degrees. So some of you have had a lot of experience in seminary. You've already taken a lot of classes. Others, that will not be the case. My best advice to you is to start early. Pick out your passage. Let me know what that passage is, and begin reading the passage over and over and over. Read the passage in different translations. Read the passage out loud. Read the passage a line at a time. Have someone else read it, and you listen to it as they read, all the while writing questions. Keep a little notebook beside you and jot down questions. They may be the simplest of questions, like who wrote this, or what was the occasion for writing it, what is the historical background on it, etc. But you may also ask questions like, why was that particular word repeated so many times? Or, this seems to take up a topic that was also covered in the book of Amos. That sort of thing. As you read and jot down questions, you'll be helping yourself. Even if you think you know the answers to the questions, you'll be helping yourself in terms of guiding your research. Because the next step is to begin doing reading of commentaries and of journal articles. If you're reading commentaries, I suggest that you read dedicated commentaries. That is, commentaries that focus specifically on the book of the Old Testament which you are examining. Obviously, if you read journal articles, try to find articles that are about the specific passage that you're writing about, or maybe key words or motifs that show up in your passage. And all the while, of course, keep notes. I have posted advice on how to write, how to do your research for an exegesis paper and how to write it. Please pay attention to that. It will help you out. The evidence from my students last semester is that a number of students profited from using the organizational structure that I suggested for them. You will, one of the requirements in this class is to do critical reviews of 5 journal articles. This may be a new exercise for some of you, and it has several purposes. For one thing, it helps you to be sure that you comprehend what a writer is saying in an article. It's not enough to just read through and say, okay, I get it. But to be able to summarize what the writer said means that you've grasped the entirety of the article and you see its flow. But it's also not enough to understand what a writer says. You need to be able to analyze what the writer says. That's why it's called a critique or a critical review. You will look for whether the writer expressed a purpose. What was the thesis of this particular article? And assess how effectively did the writer accomplish that purpose. If the goal was reached successfully, then how did How did the writer do that? What was the kind of support that made that possible? What were some valuable insights that were brought about in that paper? If the article didn't succeed very well, if it rambled, make note of that. Point out where the author could have tightened up the writing or included information, say, from archaeology or from literary studies. You will want to know how to assess the value of an article because you're going to be using other people's research in order to do your own research, and you want your research to be solidly based. Now, my suggestion would be read as your journal articles to be reviewed. Read topics that have to do with the paper that you're writing. Does that make sense? That way you're already ahead of the game. You've already got notes on your particular topic. Something to remember is that the exegesis paper is not a sermon. Some of my students last semester didn't recognize that. Don't be trying to tell me all the way through how meaningful this is or how this ought to affect my life or that sort of thing. That's not the purpose of this particular paper. An exegesis paper can serve as a foundation, a background for preparing a sermon. In fact, it should be useful in that way. But an exegesis paper is to be written as objectively as possible. Don't say, now we know that. In the first place, who's we? You and me? The rest of the class? All American Christians? Anybody that reads in the English language? Who? So don't use the word we in writing an exegesis paper unless you have defined exactly to whom does that refer. Save the application for the end. If you want to talk about how this particular passage affects the contemporary church, that's great. But save that for the end of the paper after you've already exposed the information in the passage. And as you do so, do not neglect how the information in that passage, how that scripture would apply to other audiences. For example, the first people to have read or to have listened to those words. How would it affect them? How about the Jews in exile? What would the passage have meant to them? Or after they came out of exile and during the restoration? You see, examine how the passage has meaning throughout time. That will help to guide you in understanding how it is useful for today's believers. You got to write your paper in Turabian format. Okay, that's what the seminary has said. It's going to be in Turabian format. You might wonder, why do I have to pay attention to a particular format? Don't you just get the point if I write it? There's a couple of reasons. One is that part of the exercise of writing an exegesis paper is to learn how to communicate effectively with an audience. In this case, I'm the audience. You need to communicate with me as professionally in an academic style as you can. That's my expectation. That would be the scholarly expectation. And so, when the seminary says use Turabian format, do that. It's not very hard to go online and find examples, to find guidelines for using Turabian format. It shouldn't take you very much effort to get your paper in a format that matches what the seminary expects. The second reason is that it's possible that you may someday write an article that's going to be published in a journal. In fact, last semester I had one student paper that I think could probably be rewritten, tidied up a bit, and submitted as an article. And I can guarantee you there's going to be an editor who will have requirements as far as the formatting of your submission. So learning to pay attention to what are the formatting requirements is really important. Be sure to spell things properly. Check the grammar to make sure that verbs and subjects agree with each other, that pronouns have the same number of antecedent. In other words, don't say a person must read their Bible. A person is singular, their is plural. You see what I mean? So check carefully your paper. I would suggest that you set for yourself a deadline, maybe a couple of weeks before the official deadline for the paper, and strive to get your paper written by your own deadline. That allows you time to rest, take your mind off of the paper, focus on other things for a while, and then come back to your paper and read it carefully, proofread it. You're going to find mistakes. You're going to find things that are not expressed as clearly as they could be. You're going to realize that you used the same word 4 times in a paragraph, and it becomes a little annoying. So allowing it to rest will give you time to revise your paper and make sure that it's in the cleanest shape that it can be. Okay? If you have questions about the paper, about any of the requirements or suggestions, let me know as early on as possible. I'm very glad to help. My goal here is to help you do the best job that you can do. Okay, that's a whole nother video on why do we do the assignments we do. But if you have any questions about the exegesis assignment, please let me know. Okay, happy studying.